Likutei Torah, Parshas Masei, page Tzadik Beis. We're almost done with this Maimer. Okay, we'll start 4 lines to the top of the page. Okay, the Alter Rebbe is explaining that the koyach that the Yid has to bring down this level of Kedusha all the way down into the journey through the Midbar comes to Moshe Rabbeinu and Aaron. Aaron elevates the Jews to Moshe and Hashem. Moshe Rabbeinu brings Elokus down. And that's, he says, that's an Ian of Birchas HaMitzvahs, which is bringing down the awakening from above. Like we said before, before we do a mitzvah, ideally we're supposed to make a bracha. Now doing the mitzvah brings Elokus down. No, I'm sorry. Doing the mitzvah elevates the gashmistic thing to Kedusha. But where do we get a koyach? Where do we get the ability to take the physical and make it holy? That's through the bracha of the mitzvah. We say the bracha Baruch Ata Hashem. We're saying that Hashem should be revealed all the way down here. Then that gives us the koyach from above that we should now elevate the world to Kedusha. That's Hamshachas Rusidaleila Shiyachal Alis Adavar Gashmi. Shebainasa mitzvah, that you can elevate the physical thing that you do the mitzvah with. Kaniska, like you mentioned before, in the level of Al Tikra Ma Elameya. Don't read it Ma Elameya. He says Meya is brachas nimshach. These are the 100 brachas. Like he said like this. Ma Hashem L'kach Hashem. Ma is a level of bittul. The shait is who loses the ma, the bittul that he's given. But that brings down the level, don't read it ma, read it meya. Because when you have meya brachas, meaning all the hamshachas from above, 100 means completeness of 10 times 10. You have all those brachas coming down from above, then you're able to have the level of bittul, then you're able to have all the level of elevating the gashmias. To have the kerch ma'al bittul. And like it says in Eitz Chaim, Pri Eitz Chaim about the Shar Brachas, Gabi Allah Sherdei Berchas HaMitzvahs, is also the level of Shem Mab, like you said before, the 42 journeys, whatever. And that's in Kachal, there is an Inyan Vayichtav Meisha. So it says also Vayichtav Meisha. Dr. Rebbe at the beginning of the Maim asked the question, the whole Torah was written by Moshe Rabbeinu. Why does it say here Vayichtav Meisha? It's understood, the whole Torah was written by Moshe Rabbeinu. He says the Gabi members Masois, because Vayichtav Meisha for the 42 journeys of life, that has to be Hamshachas Surusa Delayla. Has to be the Hamshach. In other words, by this fundamental aspect of life, the 42 journeys, over here the Torah wants to emphasize how do we have the koyach to travel through the Midbar and elevate the Midbar to Kedusha, that they even had a Mishkan in the Midbar, they even have Matan Torah in the Midbar. That was through Vayichtav Meisha, Moshe Rabbeinu bringing down the Giluyim from above. Like he said before, how do we bring down this Kedusha from above? That's through learning Torah. About Torah Or. Like it says Torah Or. Torah is a light. Torah is revelation. Torah is the revelation from above that gives us the strength and ability to elevate the world. Then we have the koyach to be lalis b'serutza de l'sata, to elevate the world from down here. It says in the pasuk like this: Hashem says to the Jews, "You deserted me." As teirasi leishamaru. He says you didn't keep Torah. So the Medrash says, "Halavai eisi azvu the teirasi shamaru." The pasuk says like this: Hashem says they deserted me and they didn't keep my Torah. The Medrash Hashem is really saying, I don't care about leaving me, just keep the Torah. It says, when it says over there, Halavai eisi azvu v'terasi shamara. Halavai, I don't care if you desert me, just keep my Torah. Why? Because the Gemara says the expression, the more shebetayra. It says even a sinner should learn Torah. Why? A ma'ar shebetayra, the ma'ar, the source of ar, which Torah is, will bring the person back. to Yiddishkeit. V'nei tchila, first it says v'yichtav es meitzo'eim l'maseim. Meitzo'eim, like we said in the other Maimon Al Tereb, but he's alluding into it now. The pasuk starts, Moshe Rabbeinu wrote, the going out for the travels, and these are the travels for the going out. So he says, Meitzo'eim represents the Mokken Neshamas Yisrael, the source of the Neshamas, like it says, bringing out the waters. That's even a greater level than machshava, because it says like this: the Yidden come from Olu b'machshava. Okay, the Yidden come from machshava, meaning shesham Olu atzmius neshamas Yisrael. But the makar of the neshamas is even higher than machshava. Hamakayim v'shoshim u'lamayla yaisim mechinas bala machshava. And bala ratzin not only does it come from machshava of Hashem or the ratzin of Hashem, it comes what's called bal haratzin, not the actual will. The actual will is the slight revelation of the person. This comes from the bal haratzin, the Hashem himself. Misham himshech order. From there comes out the revelation to give them the koyach lalis mimata l'mayla, to be able to go through the Masei. That's what it says. Masei Ratzaleimad Hanesia va'Allah shemimato. The going out in the elevation from down here, and like it says, Al Pi Hashem. Al Pi Hashem simply means based on what Hashem told me. They traveled to what Hashem said, they camped what Hashem said. But here the Alter Rebbe says, Al Pi Hashem, this is even higher than Pi Hashem. L'mayla mechinas Pi Hashem, which is Mamala Kolam, because Hashem created the world. That creation of the world is Mamala Kolam. Here the travels created an environment that the Jew goes higher than creation, higher than machshava, higher than dibur, higher than everything. And then the pasuk concludes, through that, aliyah ad meitzo'eim mimata l'mayla. So the pasuk says there's two things. There's Moshe Rabbeinu revealing motzo'eim l'maseim, and that source of the neshama gives the koyach to overcome all the difficulties of the journeys. And through this, you reach Masei in a greater level than you had before. Okay, that's we finished the Maimon. Okay, let's continue here in the Bir Alzem. Hine Gabi Amasois Ksiv. This is a long Maimon. Anyway, we just started today. Hine Gabi Amasois Ksiv. By the journeys it says in Pasha Baleischa, Vayi ben Tzah Aram Vayim Meisha Kum Hashem Yefut Sevach. That the Aron traveled with the Yidden in all their journeys through the Midbar. He said, "V'tzarich lahavin though inyan masor shoyu ad matan Torah shlo yadayin ha'adam." The Chayda matan Torah. If you look at the journeys, matan Torah happened after a bunch of journeys. That means until matan Torah there was no Torah, so there was no Adam. That means those initial journeys until matan Torah, the Jews traveled without the Adam. So what's the difference that those journeys they were able to accomplish without the Adam, spiritually speaking? And now, afterwards, they needed the Adam. Why were those travels unique? And he says, the first journeys of the Yidden, Midbar, Hakadav Yishuv. It wasn't a real desert. It was a desert close to civilization. Therefore, because again, Midbar represents total evil, Yishuv, civilized place, represents Kedusha. Shayashiv Adam, Sham Adam meaning Kedusha. So he says, and the initial travels until Matan Torah, because it was close to civilization, so it wasn't total evil, it was still, a little bit of Yishuv there. So Moshe Rabbeinu and the Jews were able to do it without the Aron. They're able to do it without the additional Kedusha of the Aron. He says, Agam but afterwards, in order to go through the Midbar, far away from civilization, they needed Gam Lord and Daika, and that's what it said. Okay? So bottom line is, when the Eden were still connected to Kedusha, they were able to overcome all the difficulties through Moshe and the Eden themselves, and afterwards they needed the additional support of the Aaron. He says, Kikach Inyan, this is the Inyan. Gamkin Lamaila, the way it is in the spiritual realms. Kine Nega Mamutza Ben Kedusha Ben Klippas Atameis. What is Klippas Nega? So we learned Klippa is evil, but Nega means it shines. Malayim is saying Kelodin. Malayim Ziv Umafikim Nega. Nega is a shine. So Klippas Nega is the intermediary between Kedusha and Klippa. Why? Because he klula gam miteva ra, like it says in Ruach, in the Mekavi Yecheskel, Ruach Sa'ara Vanan Godol Ve'esh Mislakachas Ve'neid Galei Saviv, and it shined from above. In other words, as Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, what's the name of the Shosh Klippas Atameis? So we usually don't say it. In Tanya, Alter Rebbe says the names. It's in Mekavi Yecheskel, it says Ruach Sa'ara, Anan Godol, Beish Mislakachas. And then right afterwards it says V'nei Galei Saviv. So after Shosh Klippas Atameis, then you have Klippas Nega, Sha'acha Klippas Nega, Maschel Ishtaush Shosh Klippas Atameis. In other words, you have Kedusha, then you have Klippas Nega, and then you go into Shosh Klippas Atameis. Shaydei Klippas Nega Nimshach Laim Yanikam Yekdusha. So what actually gives Shosh Klippas Atameis Chayes and Kedusha? It's Klippas Nega, because that's the intermediary that goes. L'chein lo kulam shavim. Therefore, all level of evil is not equal. Hakarev l'nega yesed. If you're closer to Klippas Nega in the evil, ein harab take of kolkach, like it is harachik minega. Okay. V'chein, skip the 3 or 4 lines. In other words, those Masois at the beginning of the Midbar Shosh Klippas Atameis, that was still like Klippas Nega until the Matan Torah. Hainu Aschol is Ishtaushels Klippas Atameis. Hakrevim Adayin LeNega, that were closer to Nega. How can Hoyer Chelim Samach Shishim Riben Neshamas Yisrael Umeisha Va'arim Lachniam Gam Keda Matan Torah, through the Sheva mitzvahs that they had in Mora, not Sheva mitzvahs b'nei Nech. The Eden were given in Mora 7 mitzvahs. Shmir Shabbos Kibbut Avayim, like it says B'dibur Sa'arim Achreinis, like it says the last one, Kasher Tzivcha, like Hashem already commanded you to keep Shabbos. And Rashi says, like, where did he command us to keep Shabbos? In Mora. Rashi says this in Chumash, right after Kriyas Yamsuf. Sham Sam Leichayka Mishpat V'Sham Niso. So Rashi says in Mora, right after Kriyas Yamsuf, we're given a bunch of mitzvahs. Paraduma, Kibbut Avayim, Shabbos, whatever, the various different mitzvahs.
There are levels in Klippas Nega?
Klippas Nega for sure, there's even levels of Shosh Klippas Atameis. To give you a simple example, Shosh Klippas Atameis is evil, correct? No. A chazer, let's say, it's a Shosh Klippas Atameis, but you can still benefit from it. You can't eat it, but you could benefit from it. That means if you're allowed to benefit, the benefit aspect is not Shosh Klippas Atameis, because then you couldn't elevate it. That you can elevate from a chazer, but you can benefit from a chazer means you can elevate the benefit aspect of the chazer, not the eating aspect. Orla, chametz and Pesach, meat and milk, all those things are shor and niska, whatever. All those things that are aser b'hana, that means you can't elevate even the benefit of it. Why? So the explanation is because something which is aser b'hana, forbidden to benefit from, the Shalosh Klipos HaTameis permeates the very essence of it. Not only the eating aspect of it, the essence of it. And therefore you can benefit from it. Other things, it doesn't permeate the essence. So even Shalosh Klipos HaTameis, you have different levels, so to speak. Right? Something you can't eat, something you can benefit from. And the Klipos Nega, for sure, you have Teva Ra. It's mixed Teva Ra. But sometimes you can have a little bit more Teva and less Ra. Sometimes you have more Ra and less Teva. It's Teva Ra, it's still Klipos Nega.
So in the travels, when they went from one stop to another stop, it was different. Meaning that time is spent at the place.
Sometimes they complained. Sometimes they didn't complain. Sometimes it was a worse complaint. Sometimes it wasn't such a bad complaint. You know.
Sometimes it was a week, sometimes it was 19 years.
Okay, right. Sometimes a day. But as we learned, it's called Masei because the ultimate is not the camping. The Chayr should be called Chaniyos. When you travel somewhere, you don't say I traveled. You say you where the place your destination was. Right? Went to Eretz Yisrael. You didn't say about you traveling. You called came to Eretz Yisrael. The destination is the primary. The trip is only to get to the destination. So if you have masois and travelings and campings, the ultimate goal is the campings, not the travelings. So why is it called Masei? So Chassidus explains, because the ultimate is the journey, it's not to stop. Stopping is only to move on. In other words, the travels themselves are an end, it's not a means to the end. And the opposite, the camping is a means to travel. What do you mean they did? They complained. I mean, did they wait until they got there? Knowing the Jews, they probably complained already while they were even traveling.
We there yet?
Before that, yeah, we there yet? I need the bathroom, I'm hungry. You ever take kids on a trip? Anybody has kids that went by car who went trips knows 5 minutes into the trip, they're hungry, they need the bathroom. They need a drink, they need this. In the house, they wouldn't, you know. So it's the same concept, because you don't have it, that's why you need it. The Gemara says, Mishi Yeshvi Pas Besali, a person who has bread in his basket is never hungry. Because he knows, mentally, I've been one thing, I have it. Why in a fast day people have headaches 8 o'clock in the morning already, and on a regular day they don't drink anything until 9? It's just human nature, right? On a fast day, you're 8 o'clock in the morning, I can't take it anymore. You never eat anything anyway until later. Because it's the psychology, psychological. Here I know I could eat, so I have it. It's bread in my hand, bread in the basket. That's human nature. Which is the home of Klipos that are far even from Klipos Nega, which is Teikavara, which is, again, the Midbar far away from Yishuv, is the ultimate Ra. They needed the order. And he says, what was the purpose, like we learned before? What's the ultimate purpose of traveling through the Midbar? Is to break the level of Klippa. Midbar represents Shalosh Klipos HaTameis, to break evil. Because Midbar is the source of Klippa. The opposite of Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim is Yira Shalem, complete level of fear. That's the ultimate level of Kedusha. And that's why, like we learned many times, the Rabbi explained about Shavas B'Tammuz, Yerushalayim had a wall around it, meaning Yerushalayim has to be protected. And there's a pasuk, Ani Chayma, the Gemara says Zutayra, Torah is the protection, the wall around Yerushalayim. And what happened in Shivasei B'Tammuz? They broke through the wall. Now Yerushalayim is disconnected. And when Yerushalayim is disconnected, it leads to the Churban Beis HaMikdash, the destruction. It all starts from a crack in the wall. You have a little crack in the wall that keeps getting bigger and bigger. We sim in the days, that's a sim for all generation. In other words, myself is similar, but the fact that the Eden traveled through the Midbar to break the klipa of Midbar, to come into Eretz Yisrael, right, eventually to build the Beis HaMikdash. That's the sim in the days Shai Deizeh. That's the koyach for all generations. Shai Deizeh Yulcho Kol Echad Mi Yisrael. Every single Jew is able, Laved Hashem, to serve Hashem. Ulachniya Gufei Biskafi Yisapcha. Breaking the body, either breaking evil or transforming evil, which is Ikar Aveda. That's the primary Aveda, is to break Klipa and elevate Dira B'Tachteinim, to elevate the world to a place of Kedusha. B'nei Membe's Masois, the 42 journeys in Keneg and Membe Shem Mab, of the 42 words in Ane B'Chayach, which is Sheva Midas Al Yenis, Chagas, Nehi, and Malchus. Chesed Gurut Tefes, that's why you say the Malchus. V'chol Achas Mehem Klula Mishisha, and each one, well, how do you get the name 42? So normally, like it's Shusterman, you have 49, 7 times 7. But in other places, as the Rebbe is saying here, it's the 7 Sfiris, each one composed of 6, because Malchus is the next world. V'Shiva Psukim. V'chol Pasuk Yesh V'Rak Shisha Tevis, Shebechinas HaShvi Shebechol Midah, Eina B'Cheshbon Shem Mab, V'Tzarech L'Havin. Oh, so now he says like this. So the 42 journeys, now the Rebbe is asking the question, why by Shusterman is it 49? Means 7 times 7. And by Ane B'Chayach and the 42 Masois is only 7 times 6. What's the difference? V'tzarech lahavin u'mepnei ma b'sfiras ha'emer mem tes yamer midah shiva midah seinu composed of 7, which is there's malchus in all midah, and here there's malchus not included in the midah. So he says inyan ki malchus. What is the level of malchus? Is the mamutz of malchus datzilus becomes the crown of bria. Malchus the bria becomes the crown of yitzira. Malchus the ein sof atik latzilus. Shebechin is Malchus the level of, I'll explain in a second. The level of Malchus from above, Yeredus lias atik u'mokar latachtin. It says like this. I think we learned this many times. Malchus, what connects Atzilus to Bria and Bria to Yetzira? So again, in the chain of the world, it's a chain, right? So now, when you go one link into the next link, okay? So there's part of the link stays above, and part of the link goes into the next lower link. So Malchus is the connecting link between Atzilus and Bria, between Bria and Yetzira, Yetzira and Asiya. So Malchus, it says in Kabbalah, the expression, the Malchus of Atzilus becomes Atik for Bria, means it becomes the Kesed, that crown for Bria. Okay, so Malchus' function is not in Atzilus. Malchus' function is to connect Atzilus with Bria and Bria to Yetzira. But it's not a function directly in Atzilus. The 6 Vedas, Chesed Gvurah Tzefes, you say, is a level of itself, Atzilus itself. Malchus is the connecting link. So he says, V'nei Shem Mab is the Aliyas Momata L'mayla. Shelachein Parsha Shema, there's 42 words from V'yahavta until B'sharecha. Okay? In Kabbalah, well, it's 42 words from V'yahavta until B'sharecha. So in Kabbalah it says that 42 words correspond with Ane B'Chayach, Shem Mab. That's the whole inyan of Mab. L'cheina Muven, Shema is Chesed. V'yahavta, V'shem Mab is Gvura. L'cheina, Shema is the level of Chesed. And V'yahavta is also Chesed. Right? V'ahavta is Ava, that's Chesed. And yet we say, Shem Mab, it says is Gvura Mimata L'mayla. So how do we say the first parsha of Shema is Shem Mab, when the opening besides Shema Yisrael is V'ahavta says Shem, look at the level of Ava, not Gvura. What?
The second,
right. El Bnei Sha'av, the parsha Shema, it said B'chol Meidecha B'li Gvul. Haked, which is B'li Gvul, Haked V'b'chinas Allah, Hainu Haidei Shem Mab. But in Naomi Shemaya it doesn't say B'chol Meidecha, that's the Amshach, which is Shem Ab. Like it says in somewhere else. In other words, the first parsha of Shema is Mab. That's the Aveda, like he says, Milmaylo Lamato. No, I'm sorry. Halo Milmato Lamaylo. And the second parsha, where it doesn't say B'chol Meidecha, that's the Hamshach Milmaylo Lamato. So in other words, it's again Mab and Ab. Ab is the gematria of Chesed, by the way. Chesed Samach Dalet equals 72. That's what's called Shem Ab. Shem Mab is the 42 Masois. That's Momato L'mayla. The Jews traveled going from Mitzrayim up to Kriyas up to Eretz Yisrael. That's Momato L'mayla. Anyway, he's not done yet. So he said the Fikach Hasheva Midas Shem Mab only is composed of Shisha, which is Atzmi, is the essence of all Midah. And that's the hidden part of the Midah. The seventh level of the Midah is the Gilu of the Midah, where it's revealed down there. That's a different level. So he says, there's Momayla Lamata, Momata Lamayla. Okay, the 42 Masois, the Alter Rebbe is explaining, is Momata Lamayla is Shem Mab. Okay, well, it's late, but the problem is Sfir Tza'im is also Momata Lamayla and it's 49.
Malchus does not have...
Malchus is nothing of its own. Malchus, less long